when God asked Abraham to sacrifice a son. Would you obey like Abraham? The test that changed history, and what it means for faith today. Imagine you've waited your entire life for something. You've prayed, cried, pleaded with God. Then, just when you get it, God says, now give it back. Genesis 22, verse 2. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there. As a burnt offering on a mountain, I will show you. What do you do when obedience to God feels like betrayal of your own heart? Welcome to one of the most uncomfortable and yet iconic stories in the Bible, the test of Abraham, the father of faith, caught in the crosshairs a command that seems unthinkable. Let's unravel this divine paradox. Piece by piece, Abraham was not a stranger to God's voice. He had heard it before when God told him to leave his country, when God promised him descendants more numerous than the stars. Abram was living a pretty stable, middle-class life in a city called Ur in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. He was married to Sarai, later Sarah, had wealth, servants, livestock, the whole settled and successful vibe. He came from a family of idol worshippers. Joshua 24, verse 2 throws some shade on that. So there was no previous record of God encounters in his life. But then, God showed up. No lightning bolt, no smoke, just a word. A radical, personal call. Genesis 12, verses 1 to 3. The call. The Lord said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Let's break that down. Go. God didn't even say where. Just go. Leave your family, your culture, your comfort zone, to a land I will show you. Trust without a map. Obedience before details. I will. The whole promise was about what God would do, not what Abram had to do. God was saying, you follow, I'll handle the outcome. What did Abram do? Did he say, let me pray about it for a year? Nope. Genesis 12, verse 4 says, so Abram went, as the Lord had told him. Just like that. Radical obedience. No ways. No estate agent. No. How much is the cost of living in Canaan? Research. He packed up everything, his wife, his nephew Lot, all the possessions, and hit the road at age 75. Bruh, most folks are thinking retirement. And God was like, time for an adventure. And the journey of faith begins. That one yes became the starting point of a multi-generational covenant. Abraham didn't have a child at the time, yet God said he'd become a great nation. He didn't own land, yet God promised him the whole region. He didn't know where he was going, yet he moved forward. This wasn't just a relocation. It was the start of a covenant, a sacred bond that would define Israel, bring forth the Messiah, and ultimately bless all nations. You and I, we're benefactors of that blessing because Abraham said yes. God didn't give him a contract. He gave him a promise. And that's often how God rolls with us too. He calls us out of our comfort zone. And the roadmap only appears as we walk in faith. And now, God's voice came again. But this time his instructions was a bit tough. It wasn't go. It was give. Give up your son, your miracle, your joy, your future. Before we continue, how old was Abraham when he left Ur? All right, let's do some Bible math. In Genesis 12, verse 4, it says, so Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. But wait, God originally called him while he was in Ur of the Chaldeans, Genesis 11, verses 31 to 32, Acts 7, verses 2 to 4. So here's what most scholars believe happened. God first spoke to Abram in Ur, possibly around his early 70s. Abram's father, Terah, took the whole fam and moved them halfway, settling in Haran instead of fully obeying. Terah died at 205, and then at 75, Abram continued the journey to Canaan. So, technically, he was about 75 years old when he left Haran and fully obeyed the call to Canaan. But the original call came a bit earlier, probably in his late 60s or early 70s while still in UR. How old was Abraham when Isaac was born? Now, this one is wild and straight up supernatural. In Genesis 21, verse 5, it says, Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. 100 years old. His wife, Sarah, was 90 years old, Genesis 17, verse 17. Let that sink in. That's older than retirement. That's miracle territory. That's no fertility clinic involved, only divine intervention. God literally waited until their situation was humanly impossible, so that only he could get the glory. Classic God move. That's 25 years of waiting, of hoping, of trusting, of sometimes doubting. Hello, Hagar and Ishmael saga. But God's promise still came to pass. Late by human standards, but right on divine time. You might feel like God made you a promise and then hit silent mode, like you've been walking faithfully and nothing's happening. But Abraham's story shows us, delay is not denial. God's promises age well. They just need time to cook right. So don't throw away your faith because the clock is ticking. God's not limited by your age, your season, or your situation. Before Isaac, there was a son. The plan B, that wasn't God's plan. Abraham, then still Abram, is about 85 years old. It's been 10 years since God first promised him a child and a great nation. Sarah, then Sarai, is 75, still childless and getting tired of waiting. I mean, the biological clock was way past ticking, more like expired. So what happens? Sarai's brilliant idea. The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Genesis 16, verse 2. Phew, classic human move. God made a promise, but it's taking too long, so let's help him out. Sarai offers her Egyptian maidservant Hagar to Abram to be a surrogate. And guess what? Abram agreed. Note, Hagar didn't really have a say in this. She was a servant, a slave, and culturally, this kind of arrangement was normal back then. But make no mistake, this was not God's plan. Enter Ishmael. Boom, Hagar gets pregnant. And then, when she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Genesis 16, verse 4. The vibe shifts. Hagar starts feeling herself. Sarai starts fuming. Abram is like, don't look at me. And Sarai mistreats Hagar so badly that the poor woman runs away, pregnant and alone in the desert. The first God encounter. Here's where it gets deeply personal and beautiful. In the wilderness, at her lowest point, an angel of the Lord appears to Hagar. This is actually the first recorded appearance of the angel of the Lord in the Bible. And it wasn't to a king or a prophet or a patriarch, but to a pregnant, runaway Egyptian slave girl. Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from? And where are you going? Genesis 16, verse 8. God calls her by name. Then the angel tells her, go back and submit to Sarai. Oof, but there's purpose in it. Your son will be a wild donkey of a man. Translation, independent, strong, free. Name him Ishmael, meaning God hears, because the Lord has heard of your misery. Then Hagar gives God a name, the only person in the Bible to do so. You are the God who sees me, El Roi. Genesis 16, verse 13. Come on, that hits deep. The unseen girl became seen. The unheard was heard. The misused was met by God himself. Ishmael is born. Abram is now 86 years old when Ishmael is born, Genesis 16, verse 16. Everyone probably thinks, okay, promise fulfilled. This is the heir God meant. Spoiler alert. Nope. Fast forward. Genesis 21. Isaac enters and the family fractures. Years later, when Isaac is finally born, the drama doesn't end. Sarah sees Ishmael mocking Isaac during a celebration and demands that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away. God tells Abraham to let them go, painful but part of the divine story. And Hagar finds herself wandering in the desert again, this time with a teenager and no water. Now, let's pause for a minute and ask the real questions. Like, if Ishmael was Abraham's firstborn, why did God specifically say, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and offer him? Genesis 22, verse 2. Wait, only son? What about Ishmael? Did God just ghost him? Let's break this down like Bible detectives, because there's a lot going on here. Theological truths, covenant promises, prophetic patterns, and a test of loyalty. So buckle up. First, God didn't ignore Ishmael. Let's be clear. God never rejected Ishmael as a person. In fact, he named him Ishmael equals God hears. He blessed him, Genesis 17, verse 20. He promised to make him a great nation. He rescued him and Hagar multiple times. He stayed with Ishmael as he grew, Genesis 21, verse 20. But the promise, the covenant, the line of salvation history, that went through Isaac. Let's unpack why. Isaac was a child of the promise. In Genesis 17, verse 19, God told Abraham, "Your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant." So while Ishmael was a son by human effort, Isaac was a son by divine promise. Think of it like this. Ishmael equals born of the flesh, through natural means, man's plan. Isaac equals born of the Spirit, through miraculous intervention, God's plan. Paul even uses this in the New Testament as an allegory. The son by the slave woman was born according to flesh, but the son by the free woman was born as the result of a divine promise. Galatians 4, verse 23. So when God said, "Your only son Isaac," he wasn't saying Ishmael didn't exist. He was saying Isaac is the only son of covenant promise, the one who symbolized grace, not works. The sacrifice was a foreshadow of Christ. Oh, now we're getting into prophetic waters. God asking Abraham to sacrifice Isaac wasn't just about a test. It was a prophetic picture of what God himself would one day do. So Isaac wasn't just the other son. He was a prophetic stand-in for Messiah. That's why God didn't choose Ishmael for this. It had to be Isaac, the miracle son, the symbol of grace, the one born of the impossible. Emotionally, it still hurt. Let's not forget, Abraham loved Ishmael deeply. In Genesis 17, verse 18, he actually pleads, "If only Ishmael might live under your blessing." And God, in his kindness, says yes, but still holds firm. "My covenant I will establish with Isaac." So no, God wasn't playing favorites. He was playing out eternal prophecy. Ishmael was blessed, but Isaac was chosen to carry the promise that would lead to Christ. So why not Ishmael? Ishmael was born of the flesh, not by promise. Isaac was a child of promise, a miracle baby symbolizing grace. The sacrifice was a prophetic picture of Jesus, and only Isaac fit that mold. God still loved and blessed Ishmael, but the covenant plan went through Isaac. Isaac wasn't just any son. He was a promise, born when Abraham was 100 years old, after decades of waiting. The son whose birth made Sarah laugh in disbelief. The evidence that God keeps his word. So why would that same God now demand Isaac's life? This wasn't just a test of obedience. It was a test of identity, a test of trust, a test of whether Abraham loved the promise more than the promiser. Let's pause. What would you do? Would you even recognize that kind of command as coming from God? Or would you rebuke it as a demonic lie? This is where the paradox begins. God, the giver of life, asking for human sacrifice? Isn't that pagan? Isn't that wrong? Yes, and yet it was God, the very one who had condemned child sacrifice among the Canaanites. So why ask Abraham to do what he would later forbid? Abraham said nothing. No argument. No questions. "No, but Lord," you said. The Bible tells us. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and saddled his donkey. Just like that. 3 days he journeyed with Isaac. 3 days of walking toward death. 3 days of inner torment. And yet, no hesitation. The mountain in the distance wasn't just Moriah. It was a mountain of faith, the peak of obedience, the altar where God would test not just Abraham's actions, but his heart. As they climbed, Isaac, the teenage boy, asked, "Father, the fire and wood are here, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" Let that sink in. That question, it must have pierced Abraham's soul like a dagger. And yet he replied, "God himself will provide the lamb, my son." That wasn't just a prophetic statement. It was faith under pressure. It was Abraham saying, I don't understand, but I trust God anyway. Faith, not in the plan, but in the person. They reached the top. Abraham built the altar, arranged the wood, bound his son. His son. Do you see the tension? Isaac wasn't a toddler. He was strong enough to resist, but he didn't. This wasn't just Abraham's obedience. This was Isaac's submission. Two men, united in trust, lying down their understanding at the altar. Then Abraham reached for the knife. Time seemed to freeze. He raised his hand, one breath away from doing the unthinkable. And then, Abraham, a voice from heaven interrupted. Do not lay a hand on the boy. Now I know that you fear God. At that moment, a ram appeared, caught in the thicket. God provided, just like Abraham said he would. That mountain, once drenched in tension, now pulsed with relief. And Abraham named the place Jehovah Jireh. The Lord will provide. Now here's the twist. God never intended for Isaac to die. So why the test? Because God didn't need Isaac's blood. He wanted Abraham's heart. He wanted to know, do you love me more than what I gave you? Do you trust me, even when it makes no sense? Can you obey without understanding? This was never about death. It was about devotion. Let's be honest. This story offends our modern sensibilities. It sounds cruel, harsh, divine overkill. Why test someone like that? Because love without cost is just sentiment, and faith without trials is just theory. God was shaping Abraham, not breaking him. He wasn't just making a nation. He was building a legacy of trust that echoes through eternity. Fast forward to now. Your life, your walk with God. What has he asked you to place on the altar? Maybe it's a dream, a relationship, a career, a promise he gave you that he's now asking you to surrender. Faith is easy when the blessings flow. But what about when God asks for your Isaac? What if you're called to lay down the very thing he gave you? Would you still say, yes, Lord? Because here's the paradox of faith. Sometimes God gives and then asks for it back, not to take it permanently, but to reveal whether it has become an idol. Faith is not about having all the answers. Faith is about trusting God even when the answer is a knife raised over your promise. And now let's zoom out. Abraham and Isaac were a shadow, a prophecy in motion, a divine foreshadowing. Because on that same mountain range, thousands of years later, another father would give his son. But this time, there would be no ram in the thicket, no angel voice shouting stop. God the Father did not spare his own son, Jesus Christ. He went through with it so that you and I could be spared. Romans 8 verse 32. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Isaac carried the wood. Jesus carried the cross. Isaac asked, where's the lamb? John the Baptist answered, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. The story of Abraham and Isaac is not just a test of obedience. It's a prophecy of redemption, a love story told through sacrifice. And now back to you. If God asked you to lay it down, would you? Would you trust when it doesn't make sense? Would you surrender the promise, knowing the promiser never fails? Would you walk 3 days in silence, even while your heart screams? Would you believe in the provision of God, even when all you see is a barren altar? Abraham didn't know the ending, but we do. And yet, we struggle to obey what we do understand. Maybe it's time to shift our faith from outcome-based belief to person-based trust. From I'll obey if to I'll obey because you are. Today, whatever your Isaac is, whatever altar you're standing before, remember, the God who asks you surrender is the same God who provides. He is Jehovah Jireh. And on the other side of your obedience is a blessing far greater than you could imagine. The test of Abraham was never about killing Isaac. It was about killing doubt, killing the need to control, killing the idols we make of God's gifts. So, next time God whispers, lay it down, don't fear the fire, because in the ashes of surrender, God writes the next chapter of your destiny. When God asks for your Isaac, he's preparing to reveal his provision. Like, comment, share, Subscribe to Biblical Paradox for more episodes exploring the mysteries of faith. Paradoxes of Scripture and timeless truths for today.